Drew Bledsoe now joining us via the Cowherd Global Satellite Network. Listen, we know coaching matters. And in your career, you had some great coaches, and that sometimes personalities just don't work, and that's okay. But it does feel like, Drew, that Aaron Rodgers is at least he's more comfortable, more simpatico. You know, he and Matt LaFleur generationally are closer in age. Maybe that's it. I mean, can you speak to that? Kind of just connecting with a guy, connecting with a coach.
Sure. Yeah. You know, it does matter, Colin. You know, the guy that I had 8 different coordinators in the time that I played. There were a couple of guys that I really connected with. And the big thing that happens is it's almost like you're reading each other's mind. You know, I remember I was with Sean Payton just for 1 year in Dallas, and I'm on the field, and we run one play, and then I immediately know what play is coming next. You didn't really even have to send the play in. And so you really get on the same page with the guy, and that can make life a lot easier. Plus, you know, shoot, they've got a healthy team. They're running the ball well. They're playing good defense. And all those things make life a lot easier for a quarterback. So
Belichick, Bill Belichick has a history outside of Russell Wilson of facing quarterbacks, and Peyton Manning, he had his number for years. Big Ben. So not just good quarterbacks, you know, Hall of Fame guys. What do you think it is that Belichick is doing to Patrick Mahomes in 4 different first halves that are really making Patrick struggle game after game against Bill's defense?
You know, the thing that was always frustrating in playing against those defenses is that they do what's called pattern reading and pattern recognition, right? So what that means is based on your formation and then based on the release of the receiver, they anticipate what's coming. So they're not reacting, they're being proactive. And a lot of times it felt like the defenders were running the route ahead of your receiver. Or they would read something, and so, you know, one guy's crossing, so they would come off, and then there was another guy, a safety, that would cut the route. So it's not just covering guys. It's actually recognizing what you're doing, anticipating, getting in the middle of your route before your receiver even gets there. It requires incredibly smart defenders. It requires a ton of work on behalf of their staff in order to do that. But when they do, man, it's a real pain in the ass as a quarterback. It's really not fun.
Everybody but Russell Wilson appears to struggle. Speaking of Russell, I said this. I'm a kid from the Pacific Northwest. I don't know if I like the Seahawks. I just love Russell. I love what he's doing. But I look at it and I think he's a little bit of a life preserver for an offensive line, a tight end position, a secondary. I feel they're almost too reliant on Russell to save him. What do you see as somebody from the Pacific Northwest with the Seahawks?
Yeah, you know, I've heard it said before that a quarterback at the top of his game is kind of like good marinara sauce. You know, you can just put it over the top of everything, and it covers whatever the flaws are in the meal. And, you know, Russell is that way a little bit right now. I do think the team is playing well around him. He does have some good weapons, better weapons than he's had in a little while. But, boy, he is playing at an absolute elite level. And he's doing it sometimes where he's just got to create on his own. The thing that's always amazed me about Russ, though, is, number one, he almost never makes the big mistake. And number two, you know, you watch him play and he runs around and he makes plays with his legs. The guy never gets hit very hard. And you watch these other quarterbacks run around, and I know you can't hit the quarterback and all that now, but he just never takes the big hit, and that allows him to be available all the time. So it's been fun to watch.
I tend to support quarterbacks who I think are good but are struggling. Take Carson Wentz. I really like him. Big kid, big arm, good kid. But he has now dealt 3 straight years with incredible bad luck. He lost Frank Reich, a coach. He's lost multiple receivers, offensive line. Take your own career. I think there's a little mental fatigue that we forget sometimes. These are young kids. He's from a small town, small state. He goes to Philadelphia where they wake up angry. And, you know, he's losing people year after year. He loses coaches. He loses receivers. Did you ever get to a point in your career where there is a mental fatigue? Forget the physical stuff, that you feel like you're bailing water week after week.
Well, so here's the thing. So, you know, when you see the injuries that have come up for them, you know, and I hear this said, well, I know they have a lot of injuries, but Carson still has to play it better, right? Well, but here's what happens, though, Colin. So you lose linemen, okay, and you're like, okay, we're going to have a little bit less time. Well, that means you have to process faster. It's like I would compare it to in baseball. It'd be, you know, hitting a 100-mile-an-hour fastball versus an 87-mile-an-hour fastball. You just don't have as much time to make that decision, right? So that happens. But number two, man, anytime you have a defensive back on your show, ask them what their best friend is, and every one of them will tell you a great pass rush. And so that means you don't have enough time. Well, now the defenders can jump routes. They don't have to worry about double moves. They don't have to worry about, going over the top. So now they're closer. And then you add to that he's got receivers hurt, so he doesn't know exactly where guys are going to be. So you got to make faster decisions before you get hurt. You have to try to anticipate based on less information, and then you don't know where these guys are going to be. That's a really tough equation to try to solve. And if you're faced with trying to solve that over and over again while you're getting hit, there's no doubt there's some fatigue coming in when you have to deal with all of that.
So Brady every week, passer rating's a little better, the yardage is a little better, so he's figuring it out. But one of the things we said, I think it was last week, is that for the first time in Tom's life, he's got multiple running backs, multiple tight ends. He's got slot receivers. He's got deep receivers. He's clearly connected with Mike Evans. That is clearly the first guy he has a real connection with. But I do wonder with Tom is that he's trying to appease. He wants to ingratiate everybody to this offense. He's the old guy. They're the young kids. He wants to make everybody. It's Tom. He wants to make everybody feel included. And I wonder sometimes if you can press as a quarterback trying too hard to spread the ball around. It worked this weekend late, not early. Your thoughts? Yeah,
there is a tendency as a quarterback to try to feed everybody. You got a lot of mouths to feed, right? And then you start talking about receivers, and they're, by definition, they're kind of divas. So if they don't get the ball a little bit, then they want to go cry, and you have to go give them a big hug. So I do think that you can fall into that trap a little bit. But I do think what you'll see, as the season progresses, and you saw this, and this is natural for every quarterback, including Tommy. He starts to develop a real trust and rapport with certain guys. When the game's on the line, when they need a big play, then you're going to rely on those guys. But at the same time, there is that natural tendency to try to keep everybody happy if you can.
Finally, Tua. Justin Herbert comes out, and I'm like, oh, my God, he looks really good. And then Joe Burrow, with no support up front, looks really good. And so I'm sitting there with Tua, and I'm like, okay, I'm getting impatient. I want to see Tua play. And we made this argument yesterday, Joy and I did. So Miami may not only have their top 10 draft pick, they have Houston's number one. They could have 2 top 10 draft picks. Could I make the argument organizationally, Drew? Get Tua out there. There's 3 great quarterbacks. If he's overwhelmed, Burrow's not, Justin Herbert's not. The game is built for quarterbacks to be productive. If he's overwhelmed, I may just move up and get another quarterback. Arizona did, and it was the right move. Do you think we're nuts to think that an organization would think, let's just get him out there and see if he can play and tread water here?
I think you have to be careful about what the situation is that you're putting him in, because I do think Tua is a special player. I really, really do. I think he's going to be successful. But what you don't want to do is put him out there in a situation that is going to hurt him, from a development standpoint. You want to put him in a situation to succeed early, take care of him, keep the hits off him, and allow him to have some success. So if they're going to do that, I might, if I'm looking at it, I might look at the schedule ahead. Hey, when am I playing the Jets? Maybe I'll play him when we play the Jets.
Yeah.
So he gets a win under his belt. But you don't want to do any damage. The Dolphins are a team that are likely not a playoff team this year, but can be going forward with all the draft picks and all of that. But you want to make sure that if you're going to get him out there, that you help his development and don't set him back. Okay,
Doubleback Winery in Walla Walla. You're clearly in the winery right now, right?
Yeah, we're actually right now we're in the middle of harvest. So our team, shout out to Josh and Joe and CJ and all the guys that are working those 15-hour days right now, bringing fruit in and doing pump overs and all that stuff. I'll be up and I'll come help later on this week. But they're busting their tail and making great wine for us.
I have a question. When you own a winery, are you allowed, as long as it's labor intensive, to have a glass of wine or two at like 11:30 in the morning?
Well, it's called work, Colin. You should get a taste. It's called quality control. Now, I will tell you that if I'm tasting on purpose for work, my palate is best in the morning. But if I'm doing that, then I actually generally, will spit the wine out after tasting so that I can be productive that day. Because if you sit around and drink 3 glasses of wine, with your breakfast, it kind of diminishes your productivity for the rest of the day.
You're telling me. Drew Bledsoe, everybody. Great seeing you, my man.
All right, Colin, I always appreciate it, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
Double back. Great winery in Washington State. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.